Alright, so today we have a story fresh off the presses, which means that I immediately need to preface this video by saying that what you are about to see are just allegations levied by an anonymous source through a third party. So don't just jump to conclusions and start making assumptions, as there is very limited information here to make any real verdict. On May 1st, 2025, at exactly 9 a.m., depending on where you live in the United States, an account by the name of BronyFandOnt posted this tweet, bringing forward some allegations against a notorious animation/cartoon channel known as SaberSpark. So for those of you who know a little bit about this situation, this tweet was posted multiple hours before a video was set to release going over these allegations, but the information is exactly the same across this tweet and the video, so if you can't find the original video, just know it's pretty redundant, but we'll get into that later. Now, these allegations start with an ex-fan stating that in 2011, they became a fan of SaberSpark after watching his video titled Ballad of the Brony, which, funnily enough, happens to be SaberSpark's first ever upload. This individual then states after turning 18, they added SaberSpark on Skype, exchanged phone numbers, which was a very big deal for them at the time, as this was the first time they had talked to any sort of celebrity. In 2012, this person attended their first pony convention, in which they described was the first time they traveled alone, and was soon after SaberSpark and them became friends. It is alleged that after meeting SaberSpark in person, he invited this individual back to his apartment, where they showed a video SaberSpark was working on, which caused them to internally geek out. Furthermore, according to the statement, SaberSpark brought up the prospects of both of these individuals dating and how it didn't feel right for them to do so. This person does make a mention of a 4 to 5 year age gap here as well, but since this person was 18 at the time and SaberSpark would have been around 22 or 23, this is a pretty negligible detail, as the difference between two college-aged individuals in 2012 is also quite negligible. The testimony goes on to say, after that, he almost immediately initiated making out with me and guided me to his bed. In this moment, he did not directly ask me for consent. I was thrown onto his bed and he would insert himself into me. SaberSpark was also significantly larger than me, as I was an 80-something pound 18-year-old girl, so I physically could not stop him. I felt extremely nervous and uncomfortable because I had never experienced having any sort of sexual intimacy with someone I was not dating before, much less someone I just met. I was very new to meeting people online in general. At that moment, I laid there, dissociating, as it felt very wrong while trying to rationalize it in my head to convince myself it was a safe and normal encounter. He rushed off to clean and finish himself and came back to the bed and offered me a handshake, saying, "Friends." This would cause me for the rest of the event to feel that I was taken advantage of and ashamed myself for not trying to stop the interaction. Though I tried pretending I was fine to everyone around me, I was and still am demisexual, and being put in that position was not something that I wanted. So just to pause for a moment and give my brief opinion, don't take what I say here with too much credence, but this story does feel very sensational. It also doesn't help that this story isn't providing any evidence at all, not even circumstantial evidence. So take that as you will. Now, to be clear, I am not discounting or dismissing the story, but there needs to be more here. The testimony goes on to say, I maintained the friendship until a second occurrence happening at a completely different PonyCon in 2013. This time we met in a public space but had no one around and talked for a while. He kept bringing up the prospects of us starting a relationship but how it felt wrong. He would grab my hand saying it felt so right, only to push my hand away saying but so wrong. I had decided that my crush on him was something I needed to get over because I felt my emotions were being toyed with. He then suggested going to a more public space around others, and we went into an elevator to go to the lobby of the PonyCon hotel. As soon as the door closed, SaberSpark forcefully shoved me against the wall and shoved his tongue down my throat. It scared me and actually hurt, triggering another attack of dissociation. Once again, he did not ask for consent when throwing me into the situation. Once the doors opened and people were present, this led me to feel very embarrassed. He got off me and took my hand and guided me towards the stairs to go back down to where we just were and into a men's restroom, where he pulled his pants down and guided my hands and head to perform oral sex on him. I was afraid of denying him because of past experiences with sexual assault, so I did it to get it over with without wanting to cause a problem, where he would ejaculate on my face, apologize profusely, and then offer the same handshake as he did at the con I initially met him, saying friends. Despite pretending I was fine, I had slowly begun pulling away from SaberSpark. I cried that night while staying with a friend, but waited for that friend to fall asleep so no one could hear me, and I would cry for months, feeling ashamed of myself for putting myself in a compromising situation with someone I hardly knew. I had always felt taken advantage of by him and tried being friendly and pretending nothing was wrong because it was all I knew how to do. I would blame myself for the interactions for years and only opening up a few close people, questioning if consent was implied because of my crush and unwillingness, and feared to outright try to stop the advance because of how uncomfortable uncomfortable I felt. I understand that there is a possibility that he felt consent was implied because he knew I had a crush on him. However, he not once asked me for consent directly and was instead thrown into these sexual interactions, usually very suddenly. There were no discussions about the power dynamic between us as a popular content creator and a fan at any time, and my parasocial connection to him and not wanting someone I was a fan of to hate me if I rejected him, leaving me afraid to stop his advances. Over time, I grew increasingly distant and would eventually end contact completely. I don't feel safe enough to fully come forward because I don't want his fans and friends or even him to harass or contact me publicly. I wish to stay anonymous so I can avoid the anxiety and stress of being targeted by either him, himself, his friends, and especially his fans. As SaberSpark has over 2 million subscribers, and even sharing my story at all has me feeling really afraid. I have seen other instances of SaberSpark using his enormous platform to confront people online he has had conflict with and hurt. I have also witnessed several instances of his friends attempting to justify him and his other actions. I was not made aware of his jokes about consent and his recent behavior involving Chris until only recently, and it left my stomach in knots. I please ask above all else for my privacy to be respected. I don't wish to publicly defend my personal experience and just wish to share my experience. Okay, so there are some glaring issues here. First, it's the incredibly noticeable lack of evidence here. There is no text message exchanges, we don't know the context or dynamics of their relationship, don't know how these people communicated to each other, and don't know how this person's feelings changed in the last 13 years, etc, etc, etc. Second, there are the loaded and leading implications of lack of consent here, which I'm not denying is true or otherwise. And also, the loaded statement of power dynamics and parasociality with a quote-unquote celebrity or something similar. There's just too many phrasings here that feel as if they were made to inflate the severity of these alleged interactions. The reason why it's important to take note of this is because in the past, allegations that have been levied in this fashion were not entirely transparent or they utilized mistruths. I'm not saying that is the case here, but it's important to take things like this into consideration before condemning someone. There is also the issue that this story is tied into a much larger story involving a person known as Chris, which apparently motivated this person to speak out against SaberSpark. And this does bring into question what the true motive was here. Furthermore, the way that this was delivered also seems to have been done in the most amateur way possible, with there being no further digging into the story, no pushback, and no attempt to make sense of the allegations being levied. And honestly, it feels a bit bad faith, especially when you take a look into what these people had to say after bringing forward these allegations in their video.
One point in her testimony where she questions, if I'm remembering this correctly, that like maybe she was at fault because she had a crush on him, like maybe she gave the wrong signal or something, maybe she implied something, or he thought consent was implied because he knew there was a crush on her. Like, in all honesty, consent is never implied.
They go on to deny the existence of implied consent and contradict themselves in the same conversation just a little bit later by describing a situation that's okay in their book that is literally implied consent.
Flashing her titties in the rock star's face, probably making out with him a bit of her own volition, and one of them saying, hey, let's go back and sleep in the van. Like, there are multiple instances where consent is very, very clearly given by the groupie sleeping with the rock star. And like, yeah, there may be a certain power dynamic, and like, there absolutely is multiple instances of rock stars abusing that to be like, hey, well, I'm famous, show me your titties. But there's a big difference between going, hey, I'm famous, show me your titties, and someone going, I'm showing you my titties because I want to sleep with you. Right? Like,
and nowhere in this conversation did they attempt to be charitable, attempt to analyze the situation, or give any pushback about there being a potential miscommunication instead of a fan being purely taken advantage of, and instead give all of the benefit to this person who only decided to come out with a story 13 years later.
And I also find it really, really weird that this dude meets a fan, gets the inkling she has a crush on him, so he invites her back to his hotel room. Okay, like, getting invited back to the hotel room has sexual connotations, and the fact that she didn't realize that just shows how naive she was, and the fact that none of that was communicated, because clearly he knew what he was inviting her back to the hotel room for, but she didn't. And that just gives me, like, the major ick, to be quite honest, because, like, it's really as if Saber is acting like he's Gene Simmons inviting you back to, you know, the hotel room, when in reality he's a pudgy brony YouTuber showing you his animations before he shows you his dick. Like, that's not the same thing at all.
These people don't even know to what extent these allegations are true, and they're already casting this claim that these two situations cannot be compared and that he took advantage of this girl's naivety when we don't actually know what even took place here. We don't even know the dynamics at play, and we don't have any evidence that can lead us to any reasonable conclusion. Of course, allegations like these are very complicated due to how little room there is to navigate a one-sided claim that has very little to no evidence to back it. The most proper course of action here would be to wait for a response and not jump to conclusions, which funnily enough are standards that the author of the video set for monitoring their communities but didn't even follow themselves. With that being said, you may come to your own conclusions. Feel free to disagree with anything that I said. This is a developing story that may or may not evolve the more time passes. This is the end of the video. Stick around for a short plug. If you feel like watching live drama coverage where I dig into situations like these and give my take raw, join the Discord in the link in the description to catch live streams as stories arise. Thanks for watching. Later.